visit BFSI.com. While we have seen remarkable progress of digital in each segment and mostly in BFSI space, the question is what next? And specifically, what next for rural India, commonly known as Bharat? So in this special series, Building Digital Bharat with New Age BFSI, in association with Worldline Rise, we will explore different layers of Bharat and specifically how the New Age BFSI companies are actually building Bharat. So let me take pride in introducing you to the speakers that we have for this session. My first speaker is Kavita Subramanian, co-founder Upstocks. Kavita, glad to have you.
Very nice to be here. Thank you for having us.
My next speaker is Nitya Sharma, co-founder and CEO Simple. Nitya, glad to have you.
Glad to be here as well, Amol, and look forward to the conversation today.
And my next speaker is Mr. Aditya Chatterjee, SVP Enterprise Sales, Worldline India. Aditya, glad to have you.
Thanks, Amol. It's great to be here.
My next speaker is Dhruv Jain, CEO Kashi. Dhruv, glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Amol. Glad to be here.
And my last speaker is Mr. Alok Mittal, co-founder and CEO Indify Technologies. Alok, glad to have you.
Thank you, Amol.
So, ladies and gentlemen, glad to have all of you here, and we are going to discuss a very, very, important or must say critical topic, because now the focus area for the whole BFSI companies and specifically the fintech and tech companies is the rural India. The regulators had some norms like priority sector lending. Even the listed companies also had some norms to cater to rural India's, but we could not achieve the financial inclusion which we achieved, in fact, in last 5 to 7 years with the Jam Trinity and specifically with the rise of fintechs. So now the question is, what next and how will we cater to the rural India and how the BFSI companies will actually, look at the rural India or the digital India or the Bharat and, build the whole ecosystem financially and digitally. So let me shoot first question to all of you and take your views or maybe a perspective in terms of what is happening in the rural India. And Kavita, I will start with you. This question is for all of you. Right. What are the major transformations that you are seeing that the new age BFSI companies are doing in rural India? Maybe you can start with your own experience, Kavita.
Absolutely. And Amol, I really want to congratulate you on this panel topic. I think it's extraordinarily relevant and I'm very thrilled to be here. So Upstocks was launched in 2012, right? And so sitting here 10 years later, I'm very happy to say that we've had very strong ringside view of, and in some small way participated in the transformation of fintech in India, right? So before 2016, before the Jam Trinity really took off, opening a demat account was a paper-based process, a 40-page document that one had to, if you were not in the metros, download, print out, sign in some 30 places and courier. So as you can imagine, demat and equity participation in India was primarily a metro story and a tier 1 story. Right. 2016, what changed dramatically is you were suddenly allowed to e-sign a demat account opening form. And the minute the regulations changed on that, Upstocks was amongst the pioneers in going completely paperless. The rest of the industry also followed suit in about 2 years. And so from, where in 2016, in a month, if you opened about 500 demat accounts, we were excited. And, if I come to circa now, 2021, 22, we've opened over 1 million accounts in a single month just at Upstocks, right? And even more exciting for us, more than just the jump in number of participants, is the change that we've seen in the participation of tier 2, tier 3 in rural India, right? So earlier, 80% of our customers are coming from the metros, but post 2016, that number is dramatically shifted the other way. Most of our customers are coming from a tier 2, tier 3 India. And therefore, I absolutely congratulate the government on the infrastructure that has allowed Bharat to participate in massive numbers, right? So I think that's been a huge success of government infrastructure. And, in a small way, also the fact that we're taking BFSI to the masses, to different media of communication. For example, we've been, a part of the IPL and the ICC. And so our messages is going out to everybody across the country. And we specifically do target saying, especially in BFSI and especially as investors, and Upstocks is India's largest stockbroker with over 1 crore customers. And we allow customers to invest in stocks, mutual funds, and IPOs on an online digital platform. So what that has allowed us to allow access to every Indian, no matter where you are.
Hmm.
you know, and because we are digital only, obviously, cost is pretty low. And our platform is amongst the best and the most loved platforms in the country, with a 4.7 Play Store rating. So it's a combination of all of the new digital age tech and the government infrastructure that I think has massively transformed the way Bharat participates in fintech.
Sure. Meaningful thoughts, Kavita. I will certainly come back to you on the access and how the rural market has been shaping up in this particular area. But let me take the perspective from other speakers as well. Dhruv, let me come to you first and take your opening remarks.
Sure, Amol. Firstly, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be here. Also, I think this is the right opportunity and right time for this discussion. The way we at Kashi look at it is that we see a huge, intervention both from the private players as well as the government on the space. What we are a NBFC, by the way, and we are in the lending space. And what we've seen is that while there is a lot of offtake happening at the urban centers, we see rural demand coming up in a big way, and that's one possible way where expansion can happen. The government has also done various initiatives, like they've come out with Jan Dhan Yojana. They've come out with a lot of, looking at credit cards at the local in the rural markets. Recently, we have seen UPI Lite also getting launched. So we see a lot of innovation taking place and dedicated focus to the rural space. And if you look at it, even from from a population point of view, more than 2/3 of our population actually falls in the rural space, and that's, I think, going to be one of the next key drivers, for all of us. So clearly, we see this emerging in a big way as we move forward.
Sure. Noted your points, Dhruv. Aditya, can I take your opening remarks now?
Sure, Amol. Firstly, great to be here. If we put a payments lens to it, I can divide it into two parts. One is the online payments, and second is the offline, or what we call as the POS machines or the EDC machines. So looking at the online part of it, the discussions that we have with our merchants and our customers, be it in financial services or be it in e-com or be it in any vertical,
Right.
the growth of theirs is very clearly non-metro. Right? Metros, as we know, are a stabilized market. Right? It is saturated. The growth that they are seeing, the next thousands of subscribers to their portal or the next buyers are clearly rural. And we are doing a lot of stuff from a payments perspective in terms of UPI. I won't go into UPI depth. We all know the growth of it. So I won't go into the depth of it. But there are some challenges within it that I'll also cover later. So that is from the online perspective, a huge growth story. The offline perspective, there were always issues in the rural penetration because of these devices, because of internet connectivity, because of the breakages happening. There, I think technology is playing a key role in terms of the soft POS, very simply, where your smartphone becomes a POS machine. So these two, along with factors like QR codes, etc., is helping us have a massive penetration to rural India. And I think it will only grow by leaps and bounds in the years to come.
Sure, noted your points, Aditya. Nitya, I mean, Dhruv already gave some perspective on the lending side, but I'm sure you also have a different, segment to cater. So what are your opening remarks here?
So, Amol, what we do at Simple is our mission is to make e-commerce easy. And when we think about easy, it means easy checkout and trust in the purchase itself. So that's what we do. And we use pay later, almost like a form of a khata, as a tool to be able to deliver that value to customers and merchants. Now, when we step back, I think the way we think about sort of like overall where this is all going is, you look at the building blocks of where we are today. We started with the internet, which was not very accessible to a lot of people, but a few people, but we started there. And then with mobile and 4G, 5G, etc., and cheap data, we are in this world where everybody has internet in the country and obviously in the world, or at least a lot of people have it. So that's number one. Because they have it, they're able to access world-class products and services on the internet, regardless of where they are. It could be a tier 1 city or tier 2 city or a different country or Bharat. etc. And I think the most important thing is we as in the industry and oftentimes use these sort of terms to define a consumer, Bharat, India, and so on. But the consumer does not think like that. The consumer has access to the best product and product experiences just because they have a phone and the internet, and regardless of where they live, in which country or the city they live. And so what they are expecting is just the best user experience. Now, if you were to just like step one more further, which Kavita talked about, is after the internet, we had this another wave, especially in India, very exciting infrastructure around fintech finance, right? So started with the Aadhaar, the India stack, the fact that everybody has a bank account, UPI, and then all other ways to authenticate yourself on the internet and digital signatures, etc., so that you can kind of access these services regardless where you are, right? And I think it's very exciting place we are all in India where we have this, which to a large extent still is an infrastructure. And I think the opportunities are around using this infrastructure to deliver world-class, phenomenal product value experiences to consumers. Again, the way we think about it is the consumer does not think of themselves as Bharat or something else. They think of themselves as the center of the universe, and you treat them like one. And just to give you an example, we work in online commerce, and the genesis of starting Simple was that we are a young but fast-growing e-commerce market. We have everything that is supposed to happen, like the UPI, the bank account, everything is there. Yet 70% of people still use cash to make a payment online, right? And the big driver of cash is trust. So I think there is just so much happened, but so much still to happen, and it's pretty exciting times we are all in, especially in fintech.
Okay, sure. Noted your points, Nita. Let me take your perspective, Alok, in terms of how do you see the BFSI companies are changing the rural India? What kind of changes are you seeing? Let me take your opening remarks.
Yeah, I think one of the underlying, changes in the market that we are seeing is customers across the spectrum, whether they are individuals, whether they are small businesses, whether they are agricultural businesses,
right,
are getting integrated in these informal digital networks.
Okay.
It started out with e-commerce, expanded with payments. There has been a lot of aggregation effect in the agricultural industry over the last 18 to 24 months.
Right.
And because of that, our view is that this will become the preferred route to distribute financial services over time, right? So if you look at lending, for example, lending was always given with trade till banks came up about 500 years back, right? So now there's an opportunity to integrate lending, for example, back into the trade, rather than a shop owner trading with a particular entity, distributor, let's say, but taking loans from somewhere else, which is the bank. So I think this integration of financial services with the natural business ecosystems of the underlying borrowers is one of the things that we are seeing that will alter access to financial services, whether it is lending or others, across the spectrum, including rural India. Technology obviously is enabling that, because technology is what is bringing seamlessness into integrating financial products then on top of the supply ecosystems.
Right. Sure. So noted your points. I think all of you have a very important perspective, and we can see the integral difference that we are making specifically in the rural India right now. But according to my observations, we have seen, payment rally, great payment rally started from wallets, payments, and now the digital lending. Obviously, the payment is an integral part, which has created a great revolution, no doubt about it. But my question is, what next after payment? Is credit the only option, or there are other alternatives as well? And Aditya, since you have been doing a lot of research in the payment space, in fact, my team access your report every quarter, and we do a lot of stories of the payment data for sure. I would like you to tell us, and then I will take the questions with other panelists as well. What is the major change that we should see in rural India after payments? Because what we have seen is only payments right now. What next after payments?
I don't think we have even scratched the surface as far as payments are concerned. Let me tell you a 1-minute quick story. I have a friend who stays in a city called Mandsaur. I don't know if you have heard of it. It's in MP. It's not even rural India. It's a small city, Mandsaur. So his parents have a sari shop there. So when I was talking to him last week, I was asking him because I knew I had this. I wanted some real life feedback from him. So two things came out. First was the opportunity, which he said that now around 50% of the payments of the customers in his sari shop happen through the QR code, right? And they call it through the generic name. They call it Paytm or Google Pay or Phone Pay, whatever. It's the QR code. The second point that he told me is that how stark are the down realities in rural India that we are not aware of is that even now, there are a lot of house helps and people in that strata in Mandsaur who don't even have an Aadhaar card, right? So we think urban India thinks that even since I'm in Bombay, even here, I think 99% of the people, maybe more, have Aadhaar cards, but there, the lower strata doesn't even have Aadhaar cards. So that is two things of the two sides of the spectrum, one of the opportunity and one of the huge lapse still, which is going on. When we discuss with our merchants, for example, financial institutions, we work very closely with, say, a Cholamandalam, with, say, a BALIC, Bajaj Allianz Life, which cater exclusively to rural India. They have told us that the new generation of rural, the young India there, is obviously very, very open to newer digital payment modes. Right. The person who is buying a two-wheeler the first time, he will sign an e-mandate, he will do an Aadhaar mandate. So they are very open in terms of new digital products. So huge opportunity with the new generation in rural. Secondly, when we talk to, say, the e-com vendors, right, say one of the largest e-com vendors, what they have told us, as what I said earlier, is that the growth is purely in rural, right? And in rural or whichever way you want to classify it, that is where the next 1,000 or lakhs of subscribers or customers to their website will come. These are the merchant views. But if I take an overall view in what the government, RBI, NPCI, and we as players are doing, I think one barrier we have to shatter is the UPI on feature phones, right? We all know the smartphone story. We know the success of the story, so I won't go into detail. So that's happening. But we have to break the UPI feature phone barrier. That will be one of the biggest inroads in rural India. So obviously, a lot of stuff being done in terms of the machines, which is the smart POS that I'm talking about, right? The physical POS device penetration will never happen beyond the time. It has to be digital, wherein your smartphone turning into a POS device. Okay. And the last point in terms of opportunity to break there is language, which, as we know, is not English, neither is Hindi. It has to be the regional. I think fintechs nowadays are doing a great job in terms of the language part, and that has to continue. Right. So I will just sign off by saying that Nitya spoke about the trust part. I think trust is also one of the biggest barriers to entry in digitalization in rural. The ease with which we put our credit card number on a website and transact, that mindset is far from there, especially in terms of the older generation or middle-aged generation. So those were my overall comments in terms of the payments in the region.
Sure, noted your points, Aditya. Dhruv, let me come to you and learn more from you, and specifically credit part. How do you see rural India or Bharat accessing credit? Because that's the next step after the payment, right? Once after the payment, the data is available, and India is, as they say, credit hungry country. How do you see the overall credit space in rural India?
Yeah, absolutely. So, very good points we've spoken about now. Payments we have solved to a large extent, and that's pretty much evident. I think what the next thing which we really need to look at is putting the money in the hands of the rural folks, right? Whether it is by way of a rural credit card, or whether it is by way of giving them lending, or, for example, giving them an insurance product. It's important that we expand this horizon, because ultimately payments will only be possible if there is a credit availability with the rural team. Right. So what as fintechs, what we need to do is to work very closely with with on that front. We have to look at opportunities where, for example, let's say a local kirana store is able to do a much more stuff with in the rural area rather than any other entity coming in. So maybe work with them, see what are the options available. Look at KYC in a sort of form which is not as stringent as it is for the urban areas. So we have to dilute processes. We have to dilute our kind of requirements to a bit to ensure that there is credit penetration available in the rural India as well. So these are some of the things which we think will be critical as the next stage of work for this rural folks. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for adding those critical points, Dhruv. Kavita, let me come to you now.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to make money, and that's you come into the picture. The small reference I have here is maybe 5-6 years back when I was working for the business. I happened to spoke with somebody from IIFL, the brokerage firm, and in a conversation he just told me, Amol, guess we have launched our mobile app and where are customers from? And I says, Bombay, Bangalore. He says, no, it's a small place called Ranchi. Most of the customers are coming from Ranchi. Obviously, Ranchi is still not a typical hinterland. I'm sure it's a city, but nobody could guess it. What is your experience? How has been the Bharat buying stocks on your app? How has been that, developed, and how do you see that's developing?
So like I said, most of our customers are coming from Bharat, right? So 70-80% predominantly is actually Bharat. And what is very interesting is most people do think that, our metros or tier ones have figured out everything in financial services. Possibly, the newer entrants coming from tier 2 would be the low ticket size. That's absolutely not the case. They're very savvy traders as well. And we are amazed to see that, right? But, I want to roll back to an experience that I've had personally in 2007 and talk about how much savviness and demand there is in rural India that we don't seem to understand sitting here, and how much there is a lack of opportunities there that we take for granted, right? So back in 2007, I actually spent a couple of years in literally rural villages in India. And I was working in microfinance. And one of my things that I wanted to do there was to use mobile banking, which this is before the licenses came in, as a means of basically enable people to do banking, because back then, we didn't even have bank accounts, right? And what I saw in those 2 years, literally, living in and working with very closely villages and tiny villages, people in tiny villages, is that there is massive unmet demand for financial services. We've not even scratched the surface. Two, for me, which was really, really eye-opening, was the amount of savviness that is there that we don't understand and appreciate sitting in a metro. We sometimes seem to think of it as, we need to go in there and sort of educate them and sort of bring them up the curve. Well, guess what? They know as much and more. They just operate in a different ecosystem, right? But they're very, very savvy. So just to give an example, a woman came and said, I need a loan to buy a TV. And we're like, why do you want to buy a TV? That's not exactly income generating. She's like, yeah, but I have a tea stall and World Cup cricket is coming, right? And, in the space of those 2-3 months, she'd made back the money for that secondhand TV that she bought. And I can give you numerous such stories. People buying, 2-3 goats for 4,000 rupees. And in a matter of 6 months, guess what? Goats multiply. The ROI on that investment is spectacular, like nothing that we can do in a city. And suddenly in front of my eyes, a family that couldn't afford 4,000 rupees to buy those goats is suddenly sitting on like 16,000-18,000 rupees of wealth. And that is transformational. So in front of my eyes, I have seen financial services completely transform the lives of, a family, a community, and a village. Kids are suddenly wearing shoes and chappals. They are going to English medium schools. They're getting like nutritious food, healthcare services, all of that. And so I would say that the power of financial services is so vast. Payments is absolutely the scratching of the surface. There are things that we take for granted. Access to credit is definitely one of them. Ability to build your wealth is the other. So I feel like, in rural India, we've successfully managed to educate people on the power of compounding, where, if you borrow 100 rupees, guess how much you need to return? It's 150 rupees. So we've taught them the power of compounding on the lending side. But it's about time we taught them the power of compounding on the investing side, right? If you had 100 rupee surplus, guess what? You can actually convert that into 150 rupees. So I think there is such a huge amount of demand for financial services. we're at absolutely like base zero beginning. Equity participation in India is at 6%. China is at 15%. The US is at 50%. Right. So there is a lot of work ahead of us in enabling every Indian to have access to building wealth the way we all take for granted. Mr. Ratan Tata is an investor in Upstocks. And one of the things that he exhorted of us is he's like, look, I'm already wealthy, obviously. And I also have access to so many wealth advisors who are telling me how to get better and better returns. How do we make such advice available to every Indian? And, we're talking about rural and Bharat, but I would really add that it's not exactly like everybody in the metros also has access to some of these financial services that we are all talking about and taking for granted. So there is a lot of work ahead of us. There is huge pent-up demand in the villages and tier 2 cities. There is a lot of savviness, and we have not scratched the surface yet in terms of what they have access to today.
Quite meaningful, Kavita. So I think we should also look for the companies, maybe blue chip companies, looking for good farming so that everyone can invest into.
Absolutely.
And Nitya, then, the question instinctively comes to my mind now is, since you are into the credit space, if, for example, there is a goat farming, or if the people in the rural India wants to buy goats, and if somebody wants to get into that business, what kind of risks parameters will you try to add into your due diligence strategy, while lending that person? Because, the parameters should be different, I'm sure, but the demand is also different. The business models are also different in, maybe a rural India. So how do you look at the lending or maybe the credit for the specific rural India?
Yeah. So, I think so first of all, our business is slightly different, where we currently don't do anything which would impact a customer like the one you mentioned, somebody who needs money to buy gold. We are focusing on customers who want to buy things online and have a great user experience. That's it. Some of the opportunities that digital gives us to do things like underwriting, profiling, because a lot of times payments online is about really authenticating someone, preventing fraud, underwriting someone to some extent. What happens is, when you think about underwriting and risk, there are two elements of this. One is ability to pay, and the second is intent. Right? So those are the two very important parameters, and both are very important. Now, ability to pay is a simple math problem where we just want to make sure that somebody has an income, that they get service, and will continue to have that income. And then you want to do some analysis around things like if somebody is buying something or using that money to invest in something that is income generating or asset creation, then the underwriting is obviously going to be better. But intent and therefore character is this nebulous thing. And what we all know is it is probably the most pertinent. I think what is exciting about technology and data is that character, when you think about intent and character, etc. These are behavioral traits. We are not about income or so on. And what we see is advanced technology, things like machine learning and so on, are actually very, very good at predicting behavior. Because behavior is nothing but a set of patterns, right? Credit not so much, or ability to pay not so much. So I think as we think about how financial services were delivered to customers, let's say pre-internet or 10, 20 years ago, it was very, I think what Kavita said, like a little bit like microfinance, right? You are there, feet on the street, much more personal interaction, but maybe not have that much data. But today with mobile internet, so much payment behavior and all the data we have, there's just so much to do to be able to underwrite for both income and asset creation, and then equally important behavior, which was in the previous times only limited to a relationship one might have with their sort of like the bank manager or like a community, right? So I think that's a very exciting thing that is happening with proliferation of technology and the data exhaust. One thing I would just want to quickly also just double click on what Aditya said, and I think you said, I think sometimes we say things like we say asset payment thing is done. The reality is it's actually not done. It's nowhere close to being done. Just to give you a statistic, even in tier one cities, right? Even in cohorts of people like us, 50% people choose cash or delivery on the internet. I mean, that's insane, right? So we are really scratching a lot of surfaces here, but that is also the opportunity, I think.
Sure. So Alok, now let me come to you, picking from what Aditya and Kavita told us. We are still scratching the surface. While on one side, there is a lot of scope on the payment side, but lot need to be done. My question to you, Alok, now is, going ahead, how can we actually broaden the scope of financial inclusion in a credit terms? Obviously, we had one perspective from Dhruv and Nitya, but by partnering maybe with a lot of lenders, other BFSI companies, how can we actually go ahead and maybe achieve a next level here?
Yeah. Thanks, Amol. So I think the core problems of inclusion in financial services boil down to distribution and risk management, right? Distribution in sparsely populated areas tends to be more expensive than in densely populated areas. Risk management tends to work better when you've got documented trails of data relative to when you don't. And I think both those are getting solved across the length and breadth of the country. I think it is a bit of a disservice to classify our country into India and Bharat, and I think that is an oversimplification, which is a nice positioning statement, but it leaves that continuum out. For example, I refer to these organizations within supply chains. Right. One of the other speakers referred to e-commerce sellers who are now coming from urban areas, they're coming from rural areas. Financial services thrives as a horizontal service, right? It doesn't thrive on super specialization for a small set of people, especially if you're talking about lower income people. And to that extent, I think the same, this formalization of businesses or supply chains provides a window both into scaling distribution of financial services as well as creating streams of data, that allow us to lend to these people. So just to take an example, we do small business lending both in the open market sense as well as in the supply chain linked sense, right? And our ability to go deeper into the hinterlands is dramatically higher when we go through supply chains than when we go through open markets, right? Because A, origination becomes less expensive. B, because there are transactional data trails available through these supply chains, we are able to underwrite them better and manage risk better, in spite of the fact that we don't necessarily have on-field collection capability in those locations, right? So I think we need to look at unifying elements, common platforms. Information is the first big one, and that is what is driving aspirations and business models in the rural areas, right? They are not disjointed from how a young person wants to grow. It is not different from their aspiration for a color TV. It's not different in terms of aspiration for a car, right? So information has created that uniformity in aspirations. Digitization is creating that uniformity in access to financial services. Right. And sure, are there tails of these populations that don't have access to payments today in urban areas, in semi-urban areas, in rural areas? Sure. Just as an example, one of the MSME SaaS companies that we are involved with, 55% of their usage and users are coming from X tier 4 geographies. Ranchi is tier 2, right? So Ranchi is big. We are talking about semi-urban and rural areas here, and 55% of the usage of a software product is coming from those kind of locations. So I do think that we need to think, large horizontal platforms that can scale here, information, payments, digitization. I think those are the places I would hang my hats for financial inclusion, rather than trying to figure out, very, very narrow verticals and how we solve for each of those.
So obviously we spoke about what we are doing and how are we doing right now, and obviously the scope as well. But I have now two questions. One is about the challenges that most of you are facing and how are you dealing with it, and second is what are you doing with it, in two parts. So, but We'll start with specifically the challenges and how are you dealing with it. So Kavita, it sounds really nice to understand that a lot of people are actually, coming on up stocks, buying stocks, checking on different, credit platforms or apps and looking for credit and your scan code. But what are the major challenges that you face? Because everything is digital. They don't have a branch to go back to. They do not have a customer service at their doorstep. How actually, deal with the challenges? So if you could highlight the challenges that you face, major obstacles in one reaching out with these people and solving their problems, and how, hurdles that you face while taking them to a next level.
I was just saying, I wouldn't exactly call it challenges or hurdles, right? This is just literally, you wouldn't use the same things that you would use in the US, for example, even come to a tier one India, that just would not work. So you have to tailor your business, go-to-market strategies, distribution strategies to your customer and where they are in their reality. So to that extent, again, you cannot just take a tier one business model into rural and say, it just has to work. What we do need to do is to, understand the customer very well and work to that. So for example, one of the things that somebody in urban does is you rely on your decision-making processes on brands. And therefore, when you walk into a shop, you sort of already know what you want to buy. You've already done some amount of comparison. You probably looked at some, feature comparisons and so on. It's not how tier 2, tier 3 for the most part shops. What they rely on for the most part is word of mouth. Is there somebody in their community that they respect a lot? And what is that person saying, for example, right? So especially in a space like ours, where we are in the investment space, this is not as straightforward as e-commerce or payments. There is a lot of education to be done here, right? It's got a massive education arm saying, first of all, why should you even, why is investment important? Why is it important in equities? Like, you are actually eroding your wealth to inflation. And so there's a lot of an education component to the kind of work we do. And along with that, because we are in financial services, all of us here, we have a huge responsibility towards the customer. We always need to be doing the right thing for the customer, right? So I would take these 2-3 things and say, so one of the big differences we see is in our role as educators, in our role as trust creators, and in our role as winning the heart and the trust of the key people in their ecosystems there. And then having that word of mouth trust build out as the means for people to basically sign up with different service providers.
Right. Dhruv, how do you deal with the challenges and how do you face it? Because of one side, India is a credit hungry country, people need credit. Sounds really good, but how actually we, give them a credit? How actually you deal with the obstacles there?
Yeah, sure. So you're right. So we have basically, if you look at the rural India, which is, again, like I said, there's a huge population out there which needs to be addressed. So the first and foremost thing in my view is that we need to have a financial literacy in place, because today, for example, we are having access to a lot of information in terms of, for example, the rate of interest, the kind of EMIs which are doing, the kind of reporting we do to the credit bureaus for any loans taken. Now, that sort of knowledge is unfortunately not so much available in the rural folks. So for us, important point is to have an education on the rural side, and financial literacy in that sense is a big one. And then the bigger thing also would be to have an inclusive partnership with them. So what holds good for an urban person need not hold good for a rural person. That's established. The KYC documents and the fact that there's a lot of paperwork involved is something which makes the rural folks actually not come forward and take a loan or take a financial product. So we have to work with them, work with the locals to kind of see that this is made much more easier, simpler, and in that sense include them into the financial mainstream. So literacy compounded with working with the local partners, maybe the local kirana store, maybe the local mahajan, maybe the local the head of that rural place is something where we need to kind of focus on, because that's where we would see that people would actually have their participation, and definitely word of mouth plays a big role in this. So if you're working with the right people, then you could see a larger amount of financial integration coming in.
No, sure. Noted your points, Dhruv. Aditya, let me come to you and you take your view specifically on the challenges and the next ways ahead. So Dealing with the rural is also not easy because of languages, financial awareness, and the major challenge is also is digital. Sometimes most of the people, don't manage to look at the UI UX because most of the apps or the digital ecosystem is in English. How do you see we can, resolve the challenges and maybe, kind of give them a big boost or support them to bring them under the, the bandwidth of the whole financial ecosystem?
As I said earlier, one challenge, one bucket is the mindset part of it, right? And that will take some time in the generation that the rural people have come up in, right? And the fact that when we look at frauds slash chargebacks, right, this happens mostly in those places, right? So this online frauds and the mindset is one challenge. But coming to the other part of it, the technology part of it, I think there is enough being done to overcome these challenges, right? Like I spoke about going past the feature phone, the barrier. That is a huge opportunity we have. I think NPCI and RBI, at least to people like us, they are helping us a lot in terms of reaching there with QR codes in terms of the offline world, reaching there with UPI Lite or UPI 123 in terms of the online world. So there, I think there is immense potential, and it is for us to go there and to increase our reach and bandwidth there. But I think the real challenge, which will take time to solve, which technology can't help, and that will take its time, is the mindset part of the people there.
No, sure. Alok, do you also want to add here?
No, I resonate with the point that Aditya was making. I think mindsets do play a big role. One piece of that also, especially in the lending industry, is that support, credit support in rural areas has, been seen as a subsidized space for a long time. That also prevents the flow of innovation, because then there is very little incentive for private parties to go in and serve that need if the incumbents know that they can make a loss on that and they're expected to make a loss on that business. So I think bringing in more comparative market practices is part of creating the incentive system to let more efficient solutions flow in. And a lot of this, I agree with that, is mindset changes. From a demand standpoint and digital demand standpoint, there we are fairly convinced that pull is fairly strong. We see that in our own footprint of where customers come to us from. So maybe that's another mindset difference of assuming that for a high stakes service like financial services, digital would not be sufficiently effective. I do think that there is fairly rapid adoption on digitization, even from rural areas, especially for these high stakes services, where if I can't do it myself, I'll find someone who can do it for me.
So Nita, then on the credit side, considering the different demand and maybe what you're offering in a person in Kolhapur may not be suitable to the person in Jaipur. So is it that the fintech should maybe create different products for different people, because we have a huge demography and people are absolutely different?
I'll just step back and just give you one of the foundational principles that we sort of apply when we think about building products in our company is that people's needs never change, and they are foundational. And this is true for whatever name you want to put on it: rural, tier 1, tier 2, Bharat, India, US, America, Europe. People in the end want the same things, pretty much everyone, right? Regardless of where they live. And the exciting thing about the internet is to be able to deliver to them. Now, what people do want is more of what they need. They just want to keep on wanting more. So this is how we approach product building and our jobs here. So that's number one. What is very interesting, and this is foundational to human beings, this is to us a first principle, which is digital actually is a very interesting new thing that we as human beings have been just experiencing for the last 20 years or maybe even 10 years. And for a lot of people, just 5 years. And I'll give you an example so that we are able to see through some of these jargons around Bharat and India. People like all of us will very easily walk into a Starbucks and spend 300, 400, 500 rupees on coffee, right? And we'll do it every day, every day, right? And not even think about it. But when it comes to buying an Apple app or a Google app for 50 rupees, most of us will just drop off and just not want to pay that 50 rupees. And naturally, it's not about that we don't have that 50 rupees or all of that. It is the fact that how we as human beings who have evolved over thousands and 10,000 years in a very tactile physical environment, we have a sense of deriving what we at Central like to call cognitive calculation of value and be able to rationalize, hey, this money I'm paying, will it give me value or not? And whether it's 50 rupees or 100 rupees or 100,000 rupees, people are doing the same math. And being able to appreciate that is very important. And this is, again, true for everyone, right? Regardless of where you live, we all are tuned like that. And so when we think about building our products, we really think about the person in Raipur or Indore or Mumbai or Bandra or wherever else. We do think about, hey, we will go international one day, and a person in New York and San Francisco might want to use us. And then so then one of the things that we actually have seen as we do consumer research and look at data, Internet has created a horizontal consumer class, and that's exciting. Which is why companies that approach it like that really take over the entire world, like WhatsApp, Zoom is an example, right? I mean, it was not meant for a person in San Francisco or tech people or not tech people. People around the world are using Zoom now, and the reason is the product is very simple and it addresses the foundational need, and that's what people care about, right? And so yeah, we take that approach and we do think about our customers very same, right? I mean, we're not sort of customizing for someone in tier 1, tier 2, Bharat, India. We're trying to say, okay, what is the foundational need for everyone? And let's just, in the most simple, elegant way, can solve it. And just to give you an example, I mentioned this, right? We don't think about ourselves as a payment company or a lending company or a BNPL company, although those are some of the names. We think about ourselves as a khata, right? It's really a khata. And if you think about a khata, what is a khata? Khata is something that we've been using for thousands of years. We'll probably use for another 1,000 years. Rich people use it, poor people use it, young people use it, old people use it, people in tier 1 cities use it, people in the smallest villages use it. And the reason they use it is not because it was customized for this person or that person. It solved a foundational need in commerce. And that is about great user experience in trust. That's it, right? And those things will never change. And so we think about what are those foundational principles that we can hold on to that never change. And then we assume that consumers and retailers or whoever the customers are will always want more of it. And your job is just keep on meeting the demand.
Sure. Noted your points. So I think the time is almost up. The watch is ticking, but let me take one quick question with all of you. And it would be really great if you could stick to 30 seconds to maybe 1 minute, so that we have 4 to 5 minutes to cover. And I will start with you, Kavit. So the question is for everyone. And the question is, in your capacity, individual capacity at your company level, what are the new things that you are going to do over the next 2 years or 2 to 3 years, specifically for Digital Bharat? And how do you see the growth of Digital Bharat in the next 2 to 3 years? The question is for everyone. Kavit, I will start with you.
Samuel, very quickly, I think the points have been touched on earlier, but a massive focus on financial literacy, financial empowerment, making sure that there is an element of trust. And as an ecosystem, I think this is really, really critically important. If there is a paucity of trust in credit from one company, it will affect everybody else. That customer will no longer be, or that ecosystem can't take wealth or insurance or anything else, right? So I think these two are pillars that every one of us, frankly, needs to invest in. Massive amounts of financial literacy and trust.
Okay, sure. Aditya?
From our side, it's a massive push towards the offline world, which is the shopkeepers, we spoke about. So in terms of having the digital growth to them, the QR codes, the UPI. So we have a massive push towards that in the next 1 year, in fact. And that is what we are totally committed to, and that's what we are focusing on.
Okay, sure. Dhruv?
Look, the opportunity is immense, and that's been proven. We have discussed that. And from our side, what we would do is to kind of curate products which can suit those markets and try and also build in on financial literacy as well as trust, which is the key elements to do this business growth. Because this market itself is something which has huge potential, and that we have all figured out.
Okay, sure. Alok?
See, for us in the lending business, the product market fit is thousands of years old. We built the distribution channel. I illustrated some of that to you in terms of the footprint of demand that we see. We are essentially limited by where do we understand the risk. And so one of the things that we do track and try to maximize is of the entire demand footprint that we are getting, how much of it are we able to serve. And we are taking that deeper and deeper. So for example, our new to credit models have consistently been improving in their performance. Our supply chain driven models have been improving. So our core emphasis is on making sure that today, if we serve 20-25% of the demand footprint that we generate, how can we take that to 50-55% of the demand footprint being served? And that will naturally translate into lower income, smaller geographies penetration.
Okay, sure. Nitya?
Yeah, for us, the foundational thing that we keep on working on, will continue to work, is on trust. And I resonate with what Kavita talked about. Trust is foundational. Obviously, there are details about a business, but trust is foundational. And to us, trust is really three things. One, a promised product value, or whatever the product is. Being able to meet that value at a higher standard, observable to the customer, and doing it for a long period of time. And that just keeps on compounding, and it never ends. Right? There's no limit to how much someone trusts you. And I think that is very important for building a sustainable business of any kind, regardless of which part of the world.
Noted your points, quite meaningful. I must say thank you so much for sharing these meaningful thoughts and the perspective. And let's hope the growth that we envisage specifically for Digital Bharat, will achieve in a shorter time than what we expect, and plan for a longer time. And yes, the scope is immense, and we're still scratching the surface. But I must say that the fintechs are making a difference. All of you are making a difference, and thank you so much once again for sharing all those meaningful thoughts here. So thank you, Kavita, Nitya, Aditya, Alok, and Dhruv for taking part into this Digital Bharat series of BFSI. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amol.
Thank you.
And thank you, Amol,
sir.
for being a wonderful moderator.